Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2012 David and Lyn Silfen University Forum. And now, please welcome our panelists for this afternoon's forum. And now, please welcome the President of the University of Pennsylvania, Dr. Amy Gutmann.
Welcome everybody to the University of Pennsylvania, and thank you for joining us for the David and Lyn Silfen University Forum. I am very proud to be the president of the University of Pennsylvania and the moderator of this afternoon's forum. We are going to ask, is America broken? Before I introduce our panelists, I want to extend a few special greetings. Please join me in offering a very warm welcome to the Penn couple whose generosity and vision has made this university forum possible. The Vice Chair of our Board of Trustees, David Silfen, and his wife, Lyn Silfen. Please stand so we can thank you. I also want to welcome the Penn trustees who have joined us today, including our previous Silfen Forum panelist, Andrea Mitchell. I'm really delighted that they are with us today. And I also want to take a moment to thank our Penn students, faculty, staff, and our amazing alumni community who day in and day out are fervently committed to supporting the widest range of robust and civil debate on our campus across partisan divides. Because it is in that spirit that this event today is bringing together distinguished political experts to discuss some of the most critical questions facing the United States today. We have the privilege of hearing from celebrated columnists of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal, an eminent political science scholar, a former Democratic governor, and a former Republican US senator. So let's meet them. Charles Blow is the New York Times visual op-ed columnist. Charles refers to his many years of journalism and design experience with the Times as the equivalent of a doctoral degree in current affairs and statistics. Otherwise, he would have gotten one here, but the New York Times gave it to him. He joins eye-captivating data with mind-stretching analysis, as no other columnist I know and read regularly does. With recent columns on the decline of American exceptionalism, America's exploding pipe dream, bleakness of the bullied, in honor of teachers, and for jobs, it's war, Charles is no stranger to our subject. Next to Charles is somebody many people are familiar with here. As Philadelphia Mayor, Ed Rendell oversaw what the New York Times called the most stunning turnaround in recent urban history. He also served as general chairman of the Democratic National Committee and for 2 terms as Pennsylvania governor. This proud Penn alumnus is now an on-air political analyst for NBC News and MSNBC, as well as an adjunct faculty member with the Fels Institute of Government here at Penn, where our students consistently rave about his teaching. And I'd be willing to bet you, maybe not $10,000, but I'm willing to bet you that he'll be at the Palestra tonight. Next to our governor, Wall Street Journal columnist and best-selling author Peggy Noonan is a leading commentator on American politics, history, and culture. After a meteoric rise to producer of CBS News in New York, she served as special assistant and speechwriter for President Ronald Reagan from 1984 to 1986, and as chief speechwriter for George Herbert Walker Bush when he ran for president in 1998. Peggy's widely read essays on the state of US politics and politicians are, simply stated, a model of her craft. Next to Peggy is former US Senator Alan Simpson, who served nearly 20 years representing the people of Wyoming on Capitol Hill. In 2010, he was appointed as co-chair of President Obama's National Commission on Fiscal Responsibility and Reform, co-chair with Erskine Bowles. It's called Simpson-Bowles rather than Bowles-Simpson for reasons I figured out because Alan told me that the SB abbreviation was preferable. Leave it to Alan to figure that out and tell me before I went up here, and leave it to me to tell you. Senator Simpson is also co-chair of Americans for Campaign Reform. His biography, published last September, is aptly entitled Shooting from the Lip. Next to Senator Simpson is John Lapinski. John is Associate Professor of Political Science at Penn. He is also a member of the Elections Unit at NBC News, excuse me. My apologies to the chairman of the board of Penn as well. His research on congressional lawmaking, American national institutions, and political development calls our attention to how much the policy substance and historical context of lawmaking matters. John is a sought-after teacher, and he's the undergraduate chair of Penn's Political Science Department. Speaking of the biography of Alan Simpson, I was reading it, Alan, and I have to tell this story. There's a story told in your biography that your parents, Millward and Lorna, like to tell the story about your reluctance as a child when you were very young to speak. And they always laughed and punctuated the story with, and then we couldn't get him to stop. So I'm looking forward to getting Alan, Charles, John, Peggy, and Ed started. I will make them stop in enough time to give you all a chance to ask some questions. But please join me in welcoming our 5 expert panelists. So let me set the stage for our discussion. We live in a time when it's been said most people are working harder for less, when others cannot work at all, when the cost of healthcare devastates families and threatens to bankrupt many of our enterprises, great and small, when fear of crime robs law-abiding citizens of their freedom, and when millions of poor children cannot even imagine the lives we are calling them to lead. We have not made change our friend. These words were actually spoken almost 20 years ago by President Clinton in his first inaugural address. And Clinton concluded that address by saying, our democracy must be the engine of our own renewal. There is nothing wrong with America that cannot be cured by what is right with America. So I am about to ask our panelists, is America broken, or will we be the engine of our own renewal? So let's get started. I came prepared. So how I'm going to do this, just so you know, is I'm going to ask some questions to our panelists, and I'll direct them to particular panelists and ask for some follow-up. If they feel the urge, you can jump in, and I will then move on to be able to cover a lot of ground. So let's begin by some thoughts about America's future. So I'd like to start with 2 sobering facts about America in the early 21st century. One is that we're stuck in partisan gridlock. And the other is that China and other countries are outpacing us in economic development. Now, some people can respond to that by saying, well, the founders created a government for gridlock. They didn't want government to move too quickly. And they can also point out, and this is a fact, that poor countries, when they grow faster than rich countries. However, I want to ask you the probing question, and that is, can America, Alan, actually make some hard choices? Are we capable of making hard choices about our future? You led a commission that challenged us to do that. Are we capable of it?
I think the people are capable of it. The politicians are largely incapable of it. During the time we worked for a year, and the president asked us to do this, Biden called me and said, I got a real deal for you, Al. You know, that was a great one. And so Erskine and I took it on. But we go all around the country and tell people what needs to be done. But while we were doing our work, people came up to us, and Ed would know this, anyone, and these people in Congress would say, save us from ourselves. They have worshiped the God of re-election of both parties. And they have driving forces out there like Grover Norquist or the AARP. But let me tell you, this country, if you don't understand what $1 trillion is, you got a real bit of trouble. If you spend $1 a second right now, you wouldn't hit $1 trillion for 32,500 years. The Big Bang Theory of the universe, the planets, the sun, was 13,600,000,000 years ago, and that isn't even close to $1 trillion, and we owe 16 of those babies. If you spend $1 and borrow 40 cents, you got to be stupid. We do that every day, and every day we borrow $3,600,000,000. So you can do anything you want, and Medicare is on automatic pilot. Healthcare is on automatic pilot, and it will soon squeeze out every discretionary source in the country. And when you mess with Medicare and Social Security and defense, you're going to get cremated.
So Peggy, you were in the Reagan White House, and it was President Reagan who, with a coalition, a bipartisan coalition, passed the largest tax reform in modern history. How did that happen, and could something like that still happen today, where hard choices are made? Neither the Republicans nor the Democrats got all that they wanted out of that tax reform.
Totally true. I'll tell you, having worked for an American president who was, as a personality, a strong fellow, whose philosophy was clear to people, they understood what he stood for, who wanted to push the ball forward by dealing with the other side, and who did that successfully. It made a real impression on me. I mean, I was young when I worked for Reagan. I like to claim I was 12. I was actually a little older than that, but he was the first president I ever saw up close. President Reagan had to work with an overwhelmingly Democratic House. And for how many years of his 8-year term did Reagan have a Democratic Senate? 2 or 4?
I can't recall, but he
2,
worked
4,
with everybody.
or 6. But the fact is, Tip O'Neill didn't like Reagan. Reagan had no special affinity with Tip O'Neill, but they knew their country was in trouble. They knew they had to turn taxes around and do some work on spending too. So Reagan had him in, and together they made it happen. So I am a great, this made a huge impression on me as a kid, so I'm a great believer that you can push the ball forward. And I have not, because I saw Reagan up close and Tip O'Neill, I have not been all that sympathetic to my friends who work in the Obama administration who say to me, Peggy, you don't understand, the president can't work with those crazy people on the Hill. I say, darling, I saw a president work with crazy people on the Hill. It can be done.
Are they a little crazier now, maybe, Ed?
Well, I think that's an important point. I think because of what's happened in American politics, where the bases have gotten stronger, right now most incumbents fear primary challengers far more than they fear general election challengers. And that makes them sort of hew to the right or the left, depending on which party they're in. And that polarizes the process. But I think Peggy made a great point. It's all about presidential leadership. Now, I think President Obama, on balance, has done a good job. He inherited more problems than any president in my lifetime, and he's dealt successfully with many of them. But I think he needs to understand more, and I think he's getting there, what presidential leadership is all about. What he should have done after Simpson and Bowles reported back in. Sure, there was stuff in there that his staff told him was political dynamite, if you embrace it. He should have said, I'm asking all the caucus leaders, and I'm taking some other influential members of the Senate and the House. We're going to We're going to be there for the next 3 weeks. And we're going to take Simpson Bowles, and all of us don't agree on every part of it. We're going to take Simpson Bowles, and we're going to hammer out a program to get this country back on track. And Democrats, that means yes, we're going to have to seriously consider entitlement reform. Republicans, there's no way out. You're going to have to consider raising revenue. You owe that to your country far more than any stupid no-tax pledge that you signed for Grover Norquist. Do you all realize that Grover Norquist has a no-tax pledge from 236 members of the Congress, more than a majority, and 41 members of the Senate, enough to filibuster any piece of legislation out of existence? So it comes from the president. The president's got to lead. He's got to be the one who comes in and embraces, takes responsibility. That's true for mayors, it's true for governors, and my hope is that once the president gets reelected, that's hope A. Hope B is that on Wednesday, he sends a call out to those leaders and takes them somewhere and puts this together, and we've got a 2-3 month window where we can actually get some things done for the country.
Peggy.
Very quickly, my dear gentleman, I understand how you feel about Grover Norquist. Grover Norquist says no increase in taxes, sign this pledge. But one of the things Grover says to support his argument very quickly is this. They, Congress, the House and the Senate, always come up with these packages in the past 40 years where they say, we'll cut spending and we'll raise taxes a little bit by this way or this way, but we'll cut and we'll raise, and at the end, things will be better, our deficit will go away. He said they always raise the taxes. They come through completely on that part of the promise. They never cut the spending, and that's how we got in the dreadful shape in terms of spending and deficit that we're in now. So Ed and Alan, doesn't he have a case?
Well, that may be so in the past, but we're not going to look back at the past. We're going to look back at the future, and we cannot do what we need to do as a country unless we bite the bullet on both ends of the spectrum. We've got to have shared pain. Everybody's going to stand up together and say, Mr. and Mrs. Americans, you're each going to hate part of this package, but it's the only way we can turn this country around.
Alan, go ahead, and then we're going to move on.
That Clinton did go to Obama after the report and said to him, if I had appointed a commission by executive order, 18 guys, and 11 came in and said yes, hard stuff, 5 Democrats, 5 Republicans, 1 independent, he said, I wrapped my arms around it and taken the credit. Clinton has been a big help to us on this. And it's not about just Republicans, but Grover Norquist was dragging that pledge out of people when the unemployment was 4% or 4.3, and when our debt was 4 trillion or 5. Now we owe 16 trillion, and you cannot get there by taxing your way out of it, and you can't get there by cutting your way out of it, and you could have double-digit growth for 20 years and you can't get out of it.
Okay, so poll after poll show that the American people care most about jobs, the economy, the deficit, the economic issues now. Now, that's not always been the case, but it certainly is the case now. So I want to ask a question about the role of social issues in the 2012 primary campaign. In case any of you haven't noticed, there's a primary campaign going on. At the last count, there were 20 debates, right? So here's a quote of, which preceded the campaign. And Charles, who's written about this, I want to ask Charles a question on this. One of the things I will talk about, you will rapidly see this is a quote, that no president has talked about before, Rick Santorum has said, are the dangers of contraception in this country. Many of the Christian faith have said, well, contraception is okay. It's not okay. It's a license to do things in a sexual realm that is counter to how things are supposed to be. Now, at this little later, fast forward, that was last October, fast forward, the Obama administration moved to require employers to cover the costs of contraceptives as part of employee health benefit plans. And that's also created a furor. So Charles, when poll after poll show that the American people today care most about jobs and the economy, how do you interpret the role that social issues are playing in this campaign?
Yeah, let me do two things since these guys are going back and forth so long. First, let's put Reagan into context, Peggy. Reagan was president so long ago, he may as well be Fred Flintstone. Things have moved forward so much.
If you had said Abraham Lincoln.
No, I'm serious. I mean, because the way the metabolism of politics has moved in such a rapid pace to the point where you are now constantly campaigning, you cannot do the things that were possible in the 80s. The idea that YouTube has you on a continual loop about everything you do, you can't do it. Now let's get to Little Ricky and his obsession with sex. I mean, part of you understands this kind of obsession and part of you is horrified by it because it is an absolute assault on sexual freedom in America. People say it's an assault, it's a war on women. It is a war on sex. Any sex that exists outside the realm of heterosexual married sexuality is seen as an affront to Rick Santorum and the people who cling to him. And so when you take contraception and things like that, that is Rick Santorum saying women are the guardians of chastity. And if you should fail in your responsibility to be the guardian of chastity, you must be punished for that failure.
You're looking really at me.
I'm sorry. I'm looking at everybody. Sorry. You asked the question. All right.
Fair enough.
So it's an outrageous position to take, but he has consistently held that position many, many years. And if you look back at the quotes that, I don't know when that quote's from.
Last October.
Okay, well, they're much older references of Rick Santorum and this obsession. I don't know what happened to him, you know, when he was a kid, but there's something there that needs to be resolved with a therapist and not with the presidential campaign.
John.
First of all, thank you for not giving me the contraception question. I appreciate that.
But you were brave to raise your hand.
I suppose so.
There you go.
So, you know, covering all of these primaries and caucuses for NBC, one of the things, though, that why I think that the social issues have really come to the front, even though when you look at the exit polls time and time again, it's the economy or maybe reducing the deficit that's picked as the most important issue. But what you have to remember is there's very low participation this time through. I mean, when you're looking at these contests, I mean, I was like covering the main caucuses, and the GOP chairman of the party came out and said, you know, we've had record turnout. Well, record turnout meant 100 more people than 2008. You know, 5,500 instead of 5,400 people. And so, you know, even though it may be the case when you look at these polls that a lot of people are saying the economy, when you actually look at the people who are actually turning out, you know, in the caucuses or primarily in the caucuses, but sometimes in the primaries, it's a different audience. And so, again, you're looking at the entire sort of electorate, and in fact, these candidates are focusing on who will vote for them.
Okay, but that's a perfectly reasonable diagnosis of the problem, but where does it leave us? Because we have a primary. These are the people who are, one of whom is on both sides is going to be the candidate from whom the American public, the whole American public, is going to have to choose a leader. So is there any way out of this?
Did you?
Peggy?
Sure.
I'm not here.
I'll let Peggy, and then I'll
Okay,
let you.
sure.
You can't be off the hook because you're a scholar
right.
of this stuff, right?
Look.
Go ahead, Peggy.
First of all, the American people are correct to think that the priority issue to be dealt with in American politics right now is the economy. Without a good economy, nothing else is possible. We cannot defend ourselves. We cannot have diplomacy. We cannot help the poor. We won't
Right.
have stoplights. So all of that is number one. Number two, Rick Santorum, who some of you, I mean, he was a senator from Pennsylvania for a long time. It is fine with me as a lover of free speech that Rick Santorum, for at least 10 years that I know of, has now and then talked about contraception, is lately talking somewhat about, I think, pornography. Those are personal feelings. That's just fine. What he, I think, is losing sight of is American candidates for president have to prioritize. The economy is the issue. All of your opinions on these side issues, go have your opinions. But you have to make a distinction between those things government it can appropriately be asked to change, and those things it is not appropriately asked to change.
Although I didn't pick this quote out of the hat. In the same speech, which was in front of a conservative Republican Christian group, he said this is a matter of public policy, not just a matter of personal opinion.
He may have said that, but I don't know what public policy he's thinking of since
Neither do I.
Griswold. And Amy, I must tell you, I don't know exactly. I mean, he has said many things about contraception, but Protestants and Catholics are not in agreement on contraception. Do you know what I mean? Part of this sounds a little bit like, I know, let's go back and replay Henry VIII. Do you know what I mean? It's sort of a little bit odd.
And where does it leave us Jews, you know?
Well, for one thing, I wouldn't, look, there is something that is fair that Rick Santorum himself says, and it is that the media and those who talk about politics, which includes all of us, love to talk about these things. It's a fun topic. So they bait Rick Santorum, and they are in heaven if he will talk about contraception tomorrow. It'll be all over the internet. We'll all complain about it on Morning Joe. It'll be great.
Rick's in heaven if he can talk about it.
No,
That's
he's
not.
not. He
That's
realizes
not
what a mistake
the
he
thing
made.
about the economy is that most people do, and not that people are slow, but most people don't even understand the economy. People say the economy is issue number one. People understand that I have a job or I don't.
Right.
People understand that there's a neighbor next to me who lost a house or they didn't.
Sure.
There are people who understand that gas is $4 or if it's $2. People do not understand the economy as a whole. And what people don't understand about jobs and the economy is that now we have moved into a position where the economy for jobs is a global fight to the death. And we think that we somehow or another, we can create jobs here in America that is somehow independent from the international job market. Gallup just released a book in which they talk about the global jobs war. Of the people they've interviewed, of the people on the planet, 5 billion say they want a full-time job. There are 5 billion people are of working age. 3 billion say they want a full-time job. There are 1.2 billion full-time jobs on the planet. Mm-hmm. On the planet. And we somehow now think that we can create more of the jobs here. There's no balancing. The jobs that are going to create the most profitable work are what they call STEM jobs. There's science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Those are also the easiest jobs to export because I can do that work from anywhere. I can't have somebody cut my grass from India. You can't come into my house and clean up after my grandmother from India. You can, however, build a computer from India and ship it to me. We cannot keep thinking of it in that way. And I think that people in our minds and American voters think that somehow somebody in the White House can generate a million new jobs every month. That's not the way that works. We don't understand the economy.
So let me ask Ed here, because Ed, you've really championed investing in infrastructure and creating jobs. What Charles says is sobering. What can we do in response? We can't ask the American public to tell us what the solution is. They can tell us what the priorities, where the shoe pinches, but what can you and other leaders do to make a difference on the job front? We're going to get off of contraception.
Well,
on to jobs.
Again, that's susceptible of a 30-minute answer. I'll try to do it real quickly. Short-term, long-term. Long-term, and both the short-term and long-term solutions are codified in one word: invest. We have to invest in growth. Long-term investments have to be made in education, because Charles is exactly right. It's STEM, and sophisticated STEM means sophisticated Americans trained and ready to invent, to create, to patent, things like that. And that only comes from a superb educational system. And if you haven't noticed, our educational system is, depending on what survey you read, our K through 12 are 19th to 20th in science and math and all of the things that are important. We're getting killed because we don't invest in the right things. I'm not saying throw money at the schools, but invest in the right things. Invest in getting kids interested in science at the elementary school level. Invest in making sure that we give science teachers stipends so that they stay in teaching rather than go into the public sector. There's so many ways we can invest to build up our educational powerhouse. Second, we have to invest in research and development. We cannot stop investing in research and development. Here we sit at Penn. Are we still #1 in NIH grants, Amy, or two?
One or two.
One or two.
One or two.
The jobs that flow from these NIH grants are significant. They're worldwide. They make an impact on the worldwide market. So
we did not lay off people during the Great Recession.
Absolutely. Short term.
And we balanced our budget.
Short term, we go back and invest in the thing that will create the most jobs the most quickly in America, well-paying jobs for people who are right now unemployed. The two sectors of the economy that got hit the hardest in the recession are construction and manufacturing. The answer, and it's short run, but it's not all that short run, is invest in our own infrastructure. First of all, our infrastructure needs it. Second of all, it creates jobs on the construction site and jobs back in the factories producing the steel, the asphalt, the concrete. Investment, that's the key to growth, and Simpson Bowles recognized that.
Okay, I'm going to ask Alan now, other side of the aisle, Democrat, now Republican. This is, investment sounds like spending money, so what's your view on this? Is that part of it, or is it part of the problem or part of the solution, and what else do you think?
I always tell people if they would read the 67-page report, which is in English, which was not written for pundits or panjandrums or wizards. It's got words in it like going broke and shared sacrifice. There has been no shared sacrifice in this country since World War II, none, except the wonderful people who volunteer to go fight for us. And all of that is in there, including cut and invest, including research and development. It's all in there, and it talks about revenue, because you can't do this without some revenue. You cannot get there. And you can't do it by taxing the rich. You can't get there by that either. Erskine tells that story. So the two of us, as a Democrat and Republican, try to blow up all the little stereotypes of what Republicans are supposed to feel about this. And imagine a commission where we had Andy Stern, and people would say, Andy Stern, now he's that commie, isn't he, with a service worker? I know. And Dr. No from Oklahoma, Coburn, is he on your commission? Let me tell you, those two guys put together the whole recommendation on what you do with the defense budget. And when you get all through with the debate, don't worry about hollowing out America, hollow out your brain when you're talking about our budget for defense is $760 billion.
Next country?
And every other country in the world combined is 540, including Russia and China. So, and we said, how many contractors do you have in the Defense Department? They said, well, it's a big amount. It's a range. The range is between 1 million and 10 million. And these are guys knocking off $350 an hour. And then go to TRICARE, which is for military retirees. I was in the military, so was Ed. That little baby is 20 years in retirement, military. You could have done it with the National Guard and Reserve, and it costs $53 billion a year, and the premium is $470 a year. And if you play with that one, you're going to get nailed by the VFW and the American Legion.
The key to what Alan said is cut and invest. We can do both at the same time. So, we have to invest smartly and we have to cut smartly.
Okay, so why isn't this happening? Let me give one word as an answer and ask you to expand on it. There's polarization in this country, political polarization like we've never seen it before. So Olympia Snowe, as you know, recently said she's getting out. And here's what she said. She highlighted that there is an atmosphere of polarization, and my way or the highway ideologies have become pervasive in campaigns and in our governing institutions. Now, John, is that empirically correct, or is Olympia Snowe exaggerating?
Well, I mean, I don't think she's exaggerating, and obviously she's a senator. When you look at sort of across time, it's clearly the case that in the US Congress, the center has moved away. I mean, in the sense of it's disappeared. I mean, if you were just to like look at little visuals, something that maybe that Charles would put together, I mean, you see something where it used to be the case that you would see, people of both parties sort of occupying the center, or people of both parties occupying key points, like the filibuster pivot in the Senate. And now what you see, especially like, sort of at the center, is you see no center. I mean, you see two, like two bimodal humps, essentially. And so it's not there. I mean, if you look back, like sort of like what, when Peggy was talking about sort of in the 1980s, and you looked at like sort of Southern Democrats and sort of where they were key pivotal people, right? I mean, in both the Senate and also in the House. And they were at the center, and that center's not, again, it's disappeared.
So here, let me just give you another possibility. So I want to know because this is really at the center of, can we fix it, right? You all seem to think it's broken. I mean, that is, nobody's coming. You, Alan, with a Democrat, Erskine, have come up with a solution, and nobody is running with it. Nobody is running with it. So another possibility is not that there are strong polarized ideologues out there, but that they can't come together and compromise. So Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch were pretty strong ideologues, but they compromised on a lot. Ronald Reagan was able to sit down with Tip O'Neill and craft a compromise. Why isn't that happening?
Well, look at Orrin Hatch.
Ed,
Good
why
example.
isn't it happening?
Look at Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch is facing a challenger in Utah in the Republican primary because he isn't conservative enough and he compromised. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know.
And Dick Lugar, too. Lugar of Indiana is now, but Orrin was very conservative, and he and Ted were great friends. I worked with Ted on immigration and other things.
Right.
The coin of the realm was trust. The coin of the realm is so tarnished that nobody trusts anybody. And that's the real issue that we saw in our commission.
So why? Why is it
Because they go to a private meeting and try to work something out, and then they come out and all of a sudden there's a television light, and like moths, they go up and they say, and then they blow the cover of what you were trying to do in that room, and then the media says we're all in a dark room cheating America. But don't forget, in this town, in Philadelphia, they never allowed the media within 100 yards of the building when they put together the Constitution.
Right.
There was a reason for that.
Peggy and Charles. Yeah.
Olympia Snowe felt great and deep frustration with the inability of the U.S. Senate to push the ball forward. But she herself was about to enjoy a stunning victory, unprimaried, elected by the Republican Party, was totally with her. Hatch is going to win too. I don't mean to undercut the sense that things haven't become more polarized and divisive. They have, frankly, and I think there are a number of reasons for it, but the Republicans were going to kill Olympia Snow isn't one of them. Do you
No.
know what I mean? What they were going to do was vote for her.
She was going out because
she was feeling
fed up.
frustration. There's a number of things that are happening in America. One that Alan mentions is every 4 years, the number and kind and intrusiveness and ability to destabilize of American media increases, literally every 4 years. Now we've got 360-degree coverage with Twitter and YouTube and all that stuff. That is not conducive to sitting down, having a drink, and starting to move forward on a deal. On top of that, nobody in Washington can sit down and have a drink and make a deal, in part because most of them don't drink anymore. Another reason is that they go home Thursday afternoon or Thursday night, because in the age we live in, your constituents back home get mad at you if you're not home for the weekend. So senators and congressmen aren't living together in Washington anymore. And so they're not getting to know each other. They're not going to dinner as they could when Al first came to town and when I first came to town. Another small problem is that senators and congressmen often feel so beset and so under demand by their own media people, their strategy people, their political people, that a lot of them spend time quietly in the gym working out. I once asked a congressman, "Why are you guys so buff?" And he said, "Because we're all in the gym working out." I said, "Why? What are you, idiots? You're supposed to be running America. Why are you working out?" He said, "The house gym is the only place I can hang out. I can hide from my staff." So there's a lot of disturbance going on in Washington.
Charles?
Well, I think both you guys make a great point about the media. And that part of that has to do with Americans' appetite. We cannot excuse Americans' appetite for polarized news. And it is growing. You take CNN as a prime example and how they are struggling, trying to go straight down the middle and just deliver straight news without a leaning to the left or the right. And that is no longer selling. You have Fox, which is a behemoth now and has swollen, and now you have MSNBC, which is doing extremely well by leaning a little bit to the left. And that is actually what we want. We live in news.
A little bit. Yeah. Sorry, we're laughing. Keep going.
Peggy's picking on me. All right. But we live in kind of information silos. We want to be reaffirmed in our beliefs. And so we check news sites and blogs that kind of reaffirm what we believe. Even I work at the New York Times. I know the weight of the columnists relative to the news pages. I could write about my dog getting lost. I don't have a dog, but if I had a dog, I'd write about my dog getting lost. That would make it onto the top of the most emailed list.
Totally true.
And the story they've been working on about the economy for 3 weeks would linger at the bottom. And that's a problem about appetite of Americans and what they want out of news.
Go ahead.
Except I believe that the majority of Americans still crave balance. When I was Democratic chair in 2000, I look at the audience in Fox and MSNBC. The audience is minuscule. It's minuscule compared to the vast number of Americans. It's minuscule, right?
Totally true.
So, John,
Wait, but let me finish my point.
Okay, go.
Everywhere that I go, in cities where I'm not known, people come up to me and say, "Listen, I watch you on MSNBC. I appreciate the fact that you try to be fair and you try to not demonize the other side." People want intelligent, reasonable responses. They don't want someone on saying, "We're always right, they're always wrong." They want to hear the truth. Think of what's our audience for our best shows on MSNBC? What is it, Peggy? Total audience.
Gee, I don't happen to know. Seriously,
Well, you're
I
on
would
it.
think
A million?
I would think news
A million?
or opinion.
Maybe a
Oh,
million.
the
but
best
I mean,
number?
million, right.
About 1,800,000 to
And
a
how many
million.
Americans are there?
303.
303? We're literally a third of a percent.
So let me just, on this, here's The Economist that's written that as a campaigner, President Obama was a miracle-working, aisle-jumping, consensus-seeking new breed of politician. Once elected, however, he has not shown any visible sign of rocking the Democratic boat. Now, we know that inspiring strategies are needed to win campaigns, and they differ from the compromises that are needed to make good public policy. And we know, Charles, that people are more, excited by hearing the inspiring rhetoric than they are by hearing about a compromise being hammered out. I think, Mario Cuomo famously said, you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. So, Peggy, you're a master of the poetry, but you're suggesting that the 24/7...
Charles is looking at me funny.
Right. But you have suggested that the 24/7 news cycle really has changed things. And
yes.
My question is, for you, is has it consigned us to politicians who are rewarded for being good speech makers, but not for being good policymakers?
Well, look, how many politicians on the current scene would you say are really good speech makers?
They're not.
That's true.
Okay, there just aren't
Except
that
the
many.
ones who
Look,
are.
I miss.
Good soundbite.
Thank you.
Good soundbite.
They're good.
Quick soundbite. They can't think
they're
over
good
20
with
minutes.
this. They match their media
Right.
age. Do you know what I mean? A
So you
speech
but-
is sitting down, gathering
you.
your thoughts, reflecting, prioritizing,
Okay.
deciding how you want to approach a terrible, sensitive issue, admitting to yourself that you don't want to just stand in front of a mic and say the first thing that comes to your head because NBC will love it and CNN will pick it up right away. It's admitting to yourself that you must be reflective, that anything less is unworthy of a great nation at a terrible moment. We don't have enough of that.
So it's worse than I said. We have neither good speech makers nor good policy makers.
I have
It's
never
even
seen,
more broken than
I'm
I
telling you,
imagined.
I have never seen American talking so much and saying so little. It is not just our political figures. Honey,
Okay, let me...
you know what I'm talking about. All the mass media, all the constant shut up. Just please
okay.
stop.
Erskine and I go all over the country and we say, pull up a chair. We don't do BS or mush. And people are thirsting for that.
I agree.
Yeah. Well, that...
Yeah, so do I.
okay. Right track or wrong track, you all suggest we are on the wrong track. So let me just quote from a soundbite that Ed Rendell will never live down, and he probably doesn't want to live it down. So let's just, let me begin by, according to the latest polls, more than 60% of Americans think that this country is on the wrong track. And Ed, you famously denounced the NFL's decision to postpone the Eagles-Vikings game in December 2010. I won't tell how much.
Where are you going with this?
Okay. I'll say.
He said, where are
Here's
you
the
going
quote.
with this?
My biggest beef is that this is part of what's happened in this country. Direct quote. You said, I think we've become wussies.
Good
so,
for you.
Has America really become a country of wussies?
Well, let me just say that I have a book coming.
Alan's trying to hear it. It's wussies, Alan.
When people laugh, when people laugh, I can't. I had a motor platoon when I was in the Army. I didn't have any. But when people laugh, then now go ahead, Ed. You make them laugh. Go. What do you up to?
I wasn't going to bring this up, but since Amy asked the question, I have a book coming out at the end of May called A Nation of Wusses. And it is absolutely true. We are a bunch of scared rabbits. We have leaders who are afraid to lead. I mean, think about why President Obama didn't pursue Simpson Bowles. Think about it. It's because his political advisors, and Peggy, you know that I'm right, went to him and said, oh no, if you're the first one to say we need to change Medicare entitlements, you'll get killed politically. No, you wouldn't. People want their executives to be leaders. The reason, if I were to write a political epitaph for me, my best epitaph would be that I got reelected by far, far greater margins than I got elected. And it was because I led. I wasn't afraid of the consequences. People disagreed with me about a lot of the decisions I made, but they knew that I led and that I would make decisions that I thought were right. For executives, mayors, governors, county commissioners, presidents, we want people who will lead. The president could have easily embraced it and said, look, there's some tough stuff to swallow for all of us here, but it's the only way we're going to get better. It's like taking medicine. It's not going to taste good going down, but it's the only way we're going to get better. Lead. And he's not alone, and he's not alone.
I totally agree. Everybody in America, you know, they may not know the exact number or whatever, but everybody in America knows we got a spending problem, we got a taxing problem, we got to turn it around. If an American president, and he was elected by 9.5 million votes, so popular, so admired by people, so many people moved by him. He had a Democratic House and a strong speaker. He had a Democratic Senate. He had high personal numbers. If that guy had taken a chance on this hugely serious public policy issue, the American people would have said, that guy's got some guts. They would have leaned forward and listened. We all talk about the zaniness of the right-wing base. I think it's only fair to mention one of the reasons the president didn't come forward and do the right thing was the zaniness of his left-wing base. He feared them.
Charles?
I love you, Peggy, but I just disagree with that. I mean, I believe, I mean, first of all, if you look at the Democratic coalition, there were a lot of blue dogs in there, and, you know, what we call a Republican in New York, that's what they call a blue dog in the South. I mean, those people are pretty much the same people, yeah. And what just because they have a D behind their name doesn't make them a true liberal in the sense of what we would call a liberal. So he didn't have the broad coalition that it looked like on paper. The second thing is that he did take some chances. He didn't take all the chances because the first one he came out of the gate with, which was health care reform, which maybe should not have been the first one, who knows, but it was a big thing that we have to deal with, the rising cost of health care and making sure that most, if not all, Americans are covered by some form of health care. Our health outcomes are horrendous when you look at us compared to other developed countries. We have to deal with this issue if we want to deal with the Medicare issue later on. We have to get on the front end of that, making people healthier going into old age. What we're doing is ignoring that front end part and dealing with paying for all of it on the back end. That is an enormous problem, and that sucks all the money out of being able to make investments in the future. And when you have a country like China that is outspending us as a percentage of GDP on infrastructure 3 to 1, at least, you now cannot say we're building an economy for the future. We literally have bridges that we cannot get goods across because it may crumble. We cannot he dealt with one of the big issues and got beaten up horribly for it and still is being beaten up for it, and the entire Republican primary seasons is built around opposition to the one thing on the domestic side that this president pushed through. It's not really fair to say, I don't think, to say he could have done 8 more kind of grand things with this Congress.
So we're not going to settle that, but we got it out. Let me get something else out. And Alan, you're on the spot here. Campaign finance and money in politics. We can't have this discussion about is America broken without noting that through January of this year, 59 donors, mainly individuals, but also a few corporations and unions, each made contributions in excess of $500,000 to various super PACs. That totaled more than $80 million since January. Just to put that in proportion, Richard Nixon's slush fund was about $700,000. We're talking $80 million. That's only a portion of what's been spent to date. Those super PACs account for 61% of all dollars donated to super PACs. 61% from 59 individuals or corporations and unions. So are the super PACs and money subverting American politics, Alan?
Well, first, let me just say something about Ed. The reason he gets away with stuff is his sense of humor. And people are so serious today that they think if you have a sense of humor, you're silly. But Ed and I have learned how you just get them that way and then drive a truck right over them. That's how you do it. And you've got to lead. You've got to take flack. But let me tell you, Bill Bradley.
So make a joke about money, Alan.
I know. Bill Bradley and I and Bob Kerrey and Warren Rudman were part of Americans for Campaign Reform. We were slogging along, which is a terrible thing to say, but it was called federal financing of House and Senate races, and it would have cost $1.6 billion. Well, the earmarks cost us $16 billion, so I don't worry. And then somebody will say, well, we spend more on fireworks than that. There's always a reason, but let me tell you, this is going to end up to be buy a president next year. Go buy yourself a president. I mean, look at the investment of Newt and look at the president. He's decided now he can't sit outside. They're all in it. It's not just the decision.
At the rate this is going, it's going to be a fire sale, Alan. It's not.
Well, Foster Frias is my neighbor in Cody, Wyoming, and he's buying Rex Santorum. If Santorum gets to be president, which will never happen, then Foster Frias will fill every cabinet position.
So assuming that doesn't happen, is there any way out of this?
Yeah, it's called democracy. You can't hate politicians and love democracy. People hate politicians, but they love democracy. And you can do something in November.
Yeah.
I think the guys that are going to continue to pander and give you the old applesauce and say, I can't do this and I can't do that, may get beat. And that would be the greatest thing for America, right
John, given that the Supreme Court has decided in Citizens United that money is free speech in politics, what can be done? What should be done?
Well, the problem, first of all, is it could get worse, right? I mean, in the sense of what Senator Simpson said, and right now, Newt Gingrich has been kept alive essentially by one family, right? I mean, I think it's $11 million that's been given to his campaign. Maybe it's more now. I'm not sure. But Sheldon Adelson could give $100 million, right, in the general election. There's no reason why you have to say, I mean, you listed $61 million. It could be $200 million. It could be $300 million in the sense of when you look at.
But after a while, doesn't the money, I mean, there's got to be a diminishing marginal utility to this money. I mean, after all, they're not literally buying votes. People are voting for these people.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a long slog. The Republican primary is a long slog. So was the Democratic primary last time.
The cynicism that goes with that this is terrible. The little guy, every American thinks this is evil, and it is. It's just wrong.
Well, a lot of people actually think, when you actually think about the GOP nominating contest this time, a lot of people think the tremendous amount, I mean, most of the super PAC money is going into advertising, right? I mean, so the campaigns can't use it to fund themselves, right, because of the requirement for independence. So a lot of people think that that's why there's such low participation. I mean, you get a state that gets completely blanketed with negative advertising, and then it may, true, it might help the candidate that the advertising is used for, but nonetheless, it might actually sort of depress participation and turnout. So in the short term, of course, there's nothing that we can do to change Citizens United. And so, I mean, in the sense of maybe I will have to drink my half glass empty wine after this panel, but it's really hard to figure out a short term.
Ed.
Yeah.
Well, I
want a solution.
I think there's short term, long term. First of all, the SEC, as you know, banned anyone who does underwriting of municipal or state or county bonds from contributing to those campaigns. And that was upheld by the courts. It was upheld by the courts because it had some relationship to their job function. We should pass a law, and the Congress could do this, saying that no lobbyist could give or raise money for any candidate for federal office. That would have a dramatic effect on the rule of the reign of special interests on campaigns. If we just took away the lobbyists' ability to raise money and give money to federal political campaigns. That's number one. That's the short-term thing that we can do, and it's constitutional. Are they ever going to do it? Not on your life. The second thing we could do is begin the process, and I know it's unwieldy and it's difficult, and you look at ERA, and gosh, with all of the passionate women behind ERA, that failed. But we could begin the process of amending the Constitution to say that political speech cannot be considered to be free speech. Who could do that? Well, the occupiers could do it. The occupiers searched long and hard for some seminal issue to bring them together, to actually do something positive. Get out there and let's change the Constitution.
You don't really mean that political speech shouldn't be free speech.
Certain forms of political speech can be regulated. You can't, under the Second Amendment, you can't own a surface-to-air missile because there are limits on the Second Amendment. There should be limits on what is considered to be free speech. And there are limits. You can't go into a movie theater and cry, fire.
Falsely.
Right.
And we...
Yeah,
Thank you.
People always forget that.
We shouldn't also, this is a small point, but big in another way. We shouldn't disconnect the media point from the money point.
Right.
When you have this amount of money flowing, where do you think those negative ads are being aired? Right. Media companies are now making a fortune because of Citizens United. And that means that right now you have a Republican primary, so presumably they're airing on channels that they think Republicans are watching. When you have a Democratic primary, you will have it on the other side. Media companies stand to gain a tremendous amount from Citizens United. So I'm not sure how much pushback you're going to get on that front.
The Citizens United was the Local Television Recovery Act, right? I mean, in the sense of like, if there was, there's no question about that. It's true.
Absolutely true.
And so, but just like to take 60 seconds to follow up on what Governor Rendell said, I think the solution, if you want a solution, is exactly what you said. Congress passes something. There's some evidence that some people, it's potentially that the Supreme Court wasn't 100% happy with the outcome of Citizens United, so then it gets challenged, and then you get a 5-4, sort of upholding the law. That's what you could do.
So we have not said anything about foreign affairs and the decade of wars that we've had. So let me pose this question to you. Again, Alan brought up the question of whether this country is willing to make sacrifices. So very recently, retired Major General Robert Scales wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post. And he wrote that no institutional effort can make up for the mistake at the top of our trying over the past 10 years to fight too many wars with too few soldiers. And it is striking how many wars we've fought with and how few Americans have sacrificed in order to fight them. Many soldiers and Marines have been doing 3 to 5 consecutive tours in close combat units. And a number that I saw was that 200,000 have some form of traumatic brain injury from this. And one might add, or I would add, with an unclear or unrealistic sense from our political leaders of what counts as victory. So Peggy, do you agree with Scales, and is that a serious problem with America being broken?
Yes. In 2006, I went to U.S. Army War College and spent a week there in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, at Carlisle Barracks. And I simply sat with guys and women from U.S. Army, Air Corps, Navy, some naval visitors, Marines, and they poured out to me their exhaustion. They told me that no, it wasn't their second and third tour in Afghanistan or Iraq. They always did both. It was their 4th and 5th tour. One of the things that hurt my heart so much was to see how their families were coming under stress. You know, they had young boys who were children when this whole thing started, but now that boy is hitting 12 and 13 and needs a father. and that father is not there. Look, is the cost enormous? Just terrible? Yes. We are on the brink now. There are more people who think they want the U.S. to take military action in Iran or even become involved in Syria. The Republican Party, I think every candidate save Ron Paul, has come forward and said, you know, they're sort of out-machoing each other. And some of them, you know, one of them will say, I think we have to bomb Iran on Monday, and the other will say, how stupid of you, it should be Sunday. And another one will say, oh, you're a fool, we should bomb on Friday. So they're out toughing each other, and it's, to my mind, dreadful policy and bad thinking. But if you want to just think of the small-timeness of life and the politics of it, they are giving Mr. Obama, who does, in my view, has a little less going for him right now than some of his greatest fans think. They are giving him a gift. They are saying, guess what? We're going to be the Republicans, the war party. So you can be Mr. No, be circumspect, be slow, don't want this. But we're all going ahead. No one's talking about it now. They're going to be talking about it this fall.
So the politics aside, I realize you focus, and rightly so, on the politics aside, this strikes me as more obscene than anything you can say about sex. I mean, it's that you just frivolously...
You confused me.
No.
I thought, where is she going? Look. If you are going to go back to Santorum, then I have to do a defense of this. Mr. Obama and his party, in their continuing identification of Obamacare, decided in their lack of wisdom that a few weeks ago, that the constituent items belonging to the Catholic Church would have to pay for things the Catholic Church cannot pay for because they find it morally repugnant. That is, after all, what put the whole issue out there in a big way. And I think the Republican Party is completely correct to resist this unconstitutional infringement. Thank you very much. I just think that had to be pointed out.
Obama retreated from that, President Obama. I wasn't going there, Peggy.
Well, he did something, but anyway.
I was talking about the obscenity of, and I was using it metaphorically, of frivolously suggesting that more of the same, and they're going to be the same soldiers and Marines, are going to get sent to yet another front without a clear plan. And there's a...
Am I not clear on how I feel about that?
Yes, you are.
And something tells me we are all probably in agreement on that. Would we be?
I think we are.
I want to hear Charles agree with Peggy.
No,
this
absolutely.
Is really
absolutely.
You do. There are times Charles and I do agree.
The answer before that last answer. I definitely agree on the military front. The military participation, these are the other 1%. This is the 1% that nobody ever speaks about, right? So we talk about the rich 1%, but the other 1% is the people who actually sign up in a voluntary army and go and serve. And when you look at the
Let
US...
me just pause for a second, because I think we should just, with a round of applause, salute that 1%. We can all do that. They have put their lives on the line for us. Go ahead.
But to tie it back to the other part, if you look at the U.S. Department of Defense, it is the largest single employer in the world, right? So you don't have enough soldiers to fight, but you're employing millions of people to pretend to invent things or follow people or eavesdrop on people or whatever, and trying to police the world. And you have to prioritize how you are going to have a Defense Department. Is it going to be a number of troops, or is it going to be a number of snoops? And if you don't figure out which of those things you want and how you're going to prioritize that and pay for that, then you have a real problem, because then you have the exploding budget problem that ignores the fact that we have to build things in America, ignores the fact that we have to educate American children better than we are doing now if we want to attract the best jobs of the future. Those are the things that we need to be spending that money on, and not on, you know, video game drones to go and drop bombs on everything that moves across the desert. That's what we have to prioritize.
Ed?
Well, first of all, the point that Peggy made about the force depletion is absolutely right. The point you made, Amy, those 200,000 with traumatic stress syndrome, a lot of them get sent back, including maybe the guy who killed a 16, and that's a huge problem. There's an answer to force deployment dropping. There's an answer to having a sane military policy in this country, and that's called the draft. Does anybody think? Does anybody think if we had a draft, we'd still be in Afghanistan? Does anybody think if we were drafting senators' sons and businessmen's sons and bankers' sons, we'd still be in Afghanistan? Not on your life. If we're talking about shared sacrifice, we still should have a volunteer army because it's a good way for young people to get skills and training. But we also should be honest with ourselves and say, if we're going to do this, all Americans are going to have to do this.
So I'm going to ask a wrap-up question before I ask for questions from our wonderful, engaged audience. And the wrap-up question is, I want each of you to show us your cards. Who's going to win the Republican primary nomination? Who wins in November? And a bonus question, who will the Republican nominee choose as his running mate? Vice President, if you're willing to go that far. Okay?
Romney wins the nomination, obviously. There's no way that Santorum is going to win. But it's interesting, and I like the fact that he's in. It gives me something to write about. So Romney wins. I have no idea about that because Romney is such a robot, and nobody connects with Romney, and even the base doesn't like Romney. And Obama is a campaigning machine. He will have a tremendous amount of money, and you put him in a room, and he is magnetic. And people discount him now because of his failures, but that man in front of a microphone with some lights in his face is amazing. So I would not discount him as a campaigner. So he's going to have to pick somebody. Romney has to pick somebody to kind of give him some energy and make him a human being, which is going to be hard.
So who wins in November?
Oh, Obama wins. I mean, I don't believe that.
Ed.
Well, I think Charles is right. Romney's greatest weakness through these primaries is that he can't connect with the far right. And people say, oh, it's horrible. Romney has a huge problem. He can't win the South. You mean to say Romney's going to lose Alabama to Obama? Not on your life. That huge problem is a plus come general election. It is not a problem, it is a plus. I think Romney will be the nominee eventually, but God knows he's trying to lose it. But I think he's going to become the nominee. I think when you look at the importance of the Latino vote, he's going to take a hard look at Rubio. I don't know whether Rubio conjures up the inexperienced senator argument. I don't know if Rubio's got, every once in a while, Peggy, I hear stuff about Rubio in Florida. I don't know if there's anything to that. But I think that's where he has to go. And also,
that was good.
Rubio's young. Rubio's young and exciting and does have some energy. If he plays the conventional game, he'll take Rob Portman, who's very capable, terrific guy, senator from Ohio, which he has to win.
And who wins in November?
Obama.
Peggy.
Well, I think the consensus that Romney will win the Republican nomination is probably correct. I think that is probably true. Although this has been such a freakish year that one feels reluctant to say something obvious because so many obvious things have turned out not to be true.
Right.
But you got to figure the odds are Romney. For his vice president, he would do well to think creatively. Maybe that'll include Mr. Rubio. Maybe it'll include Rob Porter. Maybe it would include Condoleezza Rice. There's, the Republicans have a very broad second tier. They will have fun picking. It's as much fun as they didn't have picking their presidential nominee. They'll have that much fun picking the vice president. And now you will say, but who's going to win? A, I don't know. B, where would I put my money? On Romney, not on Mr. Obama.
Okay. Alan.
Well, There's a great
I didn't ask you how much.
I would say
but
Romney would be the one. There's a great thing in politics, which is a forgotten axiom. People don't vote for anybody, they vote against. And if Obama keeps messing around and he gets overexposed, I mean, if you said that tonight at 3 or 7 o'clock tonight, the President of the United States would be on for a special, not many people would show up because he's on every day, and when he's on, he's pandering. And when they're all on, they're pandering. Every single one of them, pandering to the people, just giving them mush. And people are tired of that, and if the gas prices go and things happen, it won't matter what Obama does from the headquarters up there with Axelrod running the shop in Chicago, it'll be that. And I think Portman would be a remarkable candidate. I've known him for about 30 years.
Are you
Vice President.
Are you predicting or prescribing?
I think things are going to be chaos. This is nothing yet. This thing, I mean, we're at the end of the 31st of December. Are you going to ignore getting back $3.8 trillion by letting this tax thing, these guys off the hook on that? You can go find money in the street if you get to the 31st of December. Get the tax cuts, forget them, pull that $3.8 million into the economy, pull in the stuff we did back in July, get the stuff out of sequester, and you'd have about $5 trillion to play with and get out of the hole.
So I hear you. Romney, Portman, and who wins in November?
I think that Obama will have overextended himself. His political people have him on a horse that he'll be exhausted to ride it.
So Romney?
Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
John, just want to,
break the tie, John. Break the tie.
Okay, we're gonna get you back. John,
break the tie.
The scholar speaks.
Well, I think quickly that Romney seems to have the delegates. I mean, you listen to his delegate math, and then you think you don't want to hear it again. But in any case, probably Romney. But as Peggy said, who knows with this race? It's just so unpredictable. I think maybe Rubio, except maybe Romney's jealous of his hair. He's the only person that has better hair than Romney. And so I would like to sit on the decision desk into the future, so I'm not going to say who's going to win. I'm going to keep it as a tie for the general.
We'll be watching.
You mean you can't say who you think is going to win?
He can't.
Who knows?
Come on, John.
He shouldn't. He works for an American network. He shouldn't come forward and say that.
I'm not going to say either way.
Peggy, so do you and I.
Okay, I'll let somebody
So do you and I.
Yeah, but you know what? I don't mind.
That's her job.
I don't mind.
Okay.
Do we not know how I feel
I'm
and he
opening
feels?
They could go on, and we would love to hear them go on. And therefore, there's no better